Okay, so without further ado, I'm proud to introduce you to Rachel Harris. Rachel Harris is a professor of ethnomusicology and teaches in the School of the Arts at SOAS University of London. Her research has been centered on China and Central Asia, and especially on the Uyghurs. So over a period of 20 years, Rachel has conducted fieldwork in Xinjiang, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. And during her research, Rachel has contributed much to this field. As such, her latest book, Soundscapes of Uyghur Islam, is now out with Indiana University Press. So now, Rachel, if you'd like to add anything or just get started, please feel free to do so.
Great, thank you so much, Hilziba, and thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to come and share some reflections on Uyghur culture. And a big thank you to Tarim Network. I really love this initiative. I think it's such an important thing. Right. So this this talk today then is going to be something which is really particularly aimed at young Uyghurs living outside of the homeland, you know, and it's going to be different from the kind of talks I usually aim at the wider English-speaking public. You know, I'm not going to dwell on any kind of distressing accounts of Uyghur suffering. I think you're all quite well aware of that and don't need me to tell you any more. What I really want to do is just think about social media. You know, social media is increasingly a space where we all live so much of our lives these days, but it is so particularly important, I think, for transnational Uyghur communities, for people who are displaced from their homeland. It's essential for keeping touch. And when, you know, that contact is no longer possible with loved ones in the homeland, it's become increasingly a space to search for clues about what's going on, to follow the latest news. And of course, it has become increasingly contested. You know, as human rights groups and researchers or journalists have been sharing the results of their recent investigations, and individual Uyghurs have been posting their personal tragedies. So we've seen this incredible rise of counter narratives from Chinese media, from Chinese officials and individuals, trolls, if you like, who are pursuing this really very vigorous campaign to rebrand what's happening in the region today. And, you know, this has affected me personally as well. I'm sure it's affected a lot of you. You know, so sometimes I just feel that it is really hard to keep a grip on reality, to keep hold of what I know, even though, you know, I keep up very regularly across the latest research and the latest reports. And so what I want to do today is really to take a few examples of the recent propaganda and really deconstruct them and look behind these kind of images of happiness that we're being bombarded with at the moment. And really what I'm reflecting on today is how what we're seeing is this extraordinary shell of Uyghur culture. Okay, so let me see if I can move on. There we go. Yeah, okay, so the first example, something you've probably all come across quite recently, of course, was Eid. Rosa Eid, the festival immediately following Ramadan, and these extraordinary images of Kashgar and the square outside the Yidgah Mosque, where apparently hundreds, thousands even of Uyghur men were happily dancing and celebrating that traditional holiday. So you can see here an image from a Twitter feed of a journalist. Let me see if I can actually show you the actual thing. Oh, that'd be good. There we go. Yeah, right. So here's some media stuff. Simon Leplatre, French-speaking journalist, actually based in China, managed to get to the Uyghur region and here commenting on how busy and noisily everything looked and how people seemed to be having fun, and commenting how state media loved it. Now, yeah. Okay, come on, let's come back to that. There we go, thank you. So Simon Lepatre, being a good journalist, was not only there for the presentation, but also the day before. And it's really great. He says, I asked a Uyghur dude what it was all about, and he said, the Lingdao, the boss, made us come. And so you can see here people being brought into the square to rehearse that spontaneous expression of happiness. Yeah, and you can even see down there the guys who are kind of directing these young men and showing them how to dance. And so Simon Lepatre, being a good journalist, he called up Abduveli Ayup, who's of course, a scholar and an activist for whom I have a great deal of respect. And Abduveli, of course, confirms that this is really a rehearsed and manufactured display. So let's take a reality check. Here we are celebrating the end of Ramadan, a period, of course, where Uyghurs are not really permitted to fast. And let's think of what they're doing here. So this is the Sama dance from Uyghur tradition. There they are, dancing in front of the Yidka mosque, which is looking beautifully renovated, right? And let's not forget, of course, the research that's been done by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute recently, which notes that while tourist mosques like this are very much looking good and appear to be open for business, both religious and tourism now, nonetheless, we know from their detailed survey of satellite imagery that around 8,500 mosques across the region have been completely demolished since 2017. And I think that is really quite a conservative figure that they've put up there. We know that other mosques have been converted into tourist sites, bars, that kind of thing. So let's recall then that Yidka, this beautiful mosque here, is really retained for the purposes of tourism and heritage. This is the system of cultural heritage sustaining a shell of Uyghur culture, while the religious context is really what I call hollowed out. So let's think a bit about what the Sama dance really means. And a long time ago, when I first started researching the Sama dance using Chinese language sources, I was told that Sama was probably linked to Saman, in the Chinese shamanistic culture, so going back to pre-Islamic roots. Actually, Sama, of course, that term comes from the Arabic word sama, which we would usually translate into English as listening or audition. And that idea, sama, forms a part of Sufi rituals right across the Islamic world. It's about listening, but it's also about movement. It's about recitation. So the zikr, this repetition of these key religious phrases and these rhythmic movements, which are really part of that Sufi project of achieving that ecstatic state of finding the divine. So what is this doing in the square in the centre of Kashgar here? In 2006, I had an opportunity to do an interview with the musicians who's sitting on top of the roof of the mosque there and playing that instrumental combination, the sunai and the naghra drums. And they were really extraordinary musicians, is the first thing, right? So, I mean, this is a wonderful complex repertoire that they play, which goes through all sorts of like very interesting rhythms. So that kind of excites me as a musicologist. But also what I found very interesting about talking with the leader of the group, a man called Mehmet Tohti, was the history that he told me of Sama dance. He traced it back to a group of Naqshbandi Sufis who had travelled from Namangan in today's Uzbekistan several hundred years ago, he said, and who had brought with them this Sama dance, as he called it. So, for one thing, then, that is interesting because it situates Uyghur culture as part of that kind of shared Central Asian Turkic religious culture. And indeed, you just have to look at the architecture of that Yika mosque to make the links between that kind of style of architecture and other incredible mosques that you can find across the border today in Uzbekistan. So that's one thing. And then the other interesting thing for me was what he said about the repertoire. So he said we play the great pieces for Eid Day. We play Zor Nagmasi and we play Shadiana. So that piece, Shadiana, you might be most familiar with it from that kind of virtuoso rawap solo version, which was like very much part of staged Uyghur culture through the 20th century and today. But the older version of Shadiana is for that combination of Naghra and Sunai, and it really is closely linked to this religious tradition. So my colleague Rahila Dawood and her student, they've actually published a blog on our Sound Islam in China blog. I'll share the link in a minute. And they did some amazing interviews again with Sunai players who used to visit the Ordam shrine, the shrine dedicated to one of the really important transmitters of Islam into this region 1,000 years ago, right, Ali Aslan Khan. And so these musicians, of course, at the time of the interview, already the great shrine festival at the Ordam had been closed down. I think that hasn't been open since 1997. But these musicians, they still had very powerful memories of performing Shadiana at the Shrine Festival. And they talked a lot about how that music recalled those battles of Ali Aslan Khan against the neighbouring Buddhist kingdom of Khotan all those centuries ago. And the music, they said it was the same music that drummed the troops into battle. And so for them, it still had incredible power. It could evoke the spirit of that great Uyghur hero. Yeah. So remember then, when you can still hear that music being played, but these are the memories of the musicians and the people who listen, maybe or maybe not. I don't know whether the dancers down there remember that kind of history, but I relay it to you today. So that is one example of a video. Let's try another one. Yeah. So this is another one which exercised me quite a bit. This is SnBucky, who is a designated transmitter within China's heritage system of sapaya, these incredible percussion sticks. And SnBucky was suddenly appeared on my Twitter feed a few months ago, and he was directly addressing Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, the US Secretary of State under the Trump regime. And he was one of many Uyghurs who were doing these kind of, again, very obviously staged videos and accusing Pompeo directly of lying about the Uyghur genocide. Let's have a listen to him. There he is.
Şöhretlerince hayırdır can, şöhretlerince hayırdır can. Pompey, anıldın mı? Benim etkan nakşırım ne? Biz Urguyla muşunda kışal kuram inak yaşağı tümez. Nereden taptın ya? Urguyla çizgi hukuk diyen. Sepset gapni, akmaz gapni qilgan nima ekansiz ya sen? Ko'rdingmi? Saqilimni qo'ysammi o'zimning ishi? Elvatsammi o'zimning ishi? Mening ismim SnBucky. Yopurg'un naya, Eshme, Gumsha 6-chi darida o'tirib.
So there he is, giving his name, even his address. And pointing out his beautiful beard, which I have no doubt is a real beard, and telling Pompeo how happily the Uyghurs live, and this, of course, is such a recurrent theme. So, this is really one of those moments for me when my moorings in reality just start to shake. So let's think about this a bit. So he goes on to say in this video that, he has 42 shagird, he has 42 disciples, people who are learning sapaya from him, so he's continuing to transmit his culture. But what does it actually mean to be transmitting sapaya? What is that about? These instruments, sapaya, these percussion sticks, are of course at the heart of the musical culture of the ashik, and again we're back with that kind of Sufi tradition of Islam. Let's have another look at a different video. So, by way of contrast with SnBucky, I want to play you just a short bit of an actual feature film made by a Chinese ethnographic filmmaker, Liu Xiangchen, back in 2008. So again, quite recent material. And it's a fantastic film. I really recommend it to you, which follows the lives of several of these ashik. These are people who really devote themselves to the practice of reciting these Hikmat, these religious prayers, and the contemplation of the divine. Very strongly Sufi kind of practice, and very distinctive of Uyghur culture. So this group of ashik you can see in this video, then they're in a Sufi lodge, the Hanukkah, at one of the big shrines in the south of the region, and they're reciting these Hikmat to the accompaniment of the sapaya. Oop, let's not have that. Let's see if we can find a video. Oh, I've been having trouble with my clips. I might have lost that one. That's a shame. Perhaps we can come back to that in a minute. So yeah, I'll recommend you the film and move on. But the point I want to make about this this kind of ashik practice is that it is a deeply it's a deeply Central Asian practice. They recite the really the ecstatic poetry of these Central Asian poets, medieval poets like Nawai. They are allied to these Central Asian religious orders like the Naqshbandi. And this repertoire is something which has found its way into the 12 Muqam repertoire. So you can still even hear some of their words, although often, you know, the references to Allah have been removed in the professional performances. But this shrine-based practice, of course, is something which has been very firmly wiped out, at least for the moment. You know, many of the shrines have been destroyed, and this kind of religious practice, of course, has been criminalized. So let's turn to something else that caught my attention. This one is from last year, I think, a little while ago, when we found on TikTok, or rather on the Chinese Douyin, a little video which had been posted by a Uyghur government official. This official, he was part of that big wave of officials who went down to the countryside as part of the Becoming Family campaign, and who worked on, you know, re-educating Uyghur peasants and manufacturing these kind of extraordinary representations of patriotism. So these musicians who come from an area near Shaya in Aksu are here in this brand new revolutionary Chinese style tea house with this extraordinary image of Chairman Mao with a sun behind him, and they're playing, of course, a red song. Can we see a bit of that? Yeah, we certainly can. Yeah, so that one was really extraordinary for me because I knew these musicians a while back, and you know, I've spent time walking down these roads and never seen this particular tea house, I must say, back in the 2000s. So I wanted to play you a little clip of a video that I took myself a little while back, which also featured these musicians, but which featured them playing their own music in the context of their own community. And so this was a village, Meshrep, in the Shaya region, which I attended and took some video in 2009. There they are. Yeah, so that was an incredible party. I have happy memories of that. And of course, I've spoken about these Meshrep gatherings in different fora before, and I've published a bit about it. We have a project going on at the moment working with Uyghur communities in Kazakhstan, actually, and so again, I'll share the link to the website at the end of this talk if you want to see some of the videos we've been taking there. But this is just to emphasize the importance of music, which is really embedded in community life. So these musicians, you know, they were at that time playing for these community gatherings. The community gatherings were a really important way of really bringing the village people together, for transmitting the culture, and doing all kinds of important work, which the kind of Meshrep that we see now on stage and on TV, of course, are not doing, because they are so completely unrooted, deracinated, as we say, you know, cut off from the community. And the communities, of course, are really not able to organise their own Meshrep anymore. So, yeah, so this is my last little theme then, which is about tourism. And this really marks what is going on at the moment. This is this huge push from the government, with a load of musical propaganda coming with it. So partly we have this massive narrative of, okay, it's all fine now, you know, those dangerous and violent terrorists have been suppressed. Now Xinjiang is safe. Xinjiang is beautiful. Welcome to Xinjiang. This, of course, is a narrative which is aimed primarily at the Chinese market. And of course, you know, let me say now that this new normality, which is being promoted so strong, is based on a reality in the region now where we've seen the graduates of the internment camps being moved into forced labour in new factories. So many intellectuals and religious leaders moved from the internment camps into long prison sentences. And so this whole kind of narrative of happy Xinjiang is really overlaying some very serious ongoing suffering, just to throw that in. And really, this is a massive push now. So the official figures say that the region is aiming to attract more than 200 million tourists in 2021, and an estimated 400 million tourists in 2025. So this is really huge. And I've been speaking with some Western journalists who've been taken on these kind of very carefully stage-managed tours as part of that tourism drive. And they've made comments like, you know, it just seemed really weird, Rachel. You know, everyone looked so happy again, and people seem to be throwing themselves in front of my camera, you know, just really desperate to take photos with me. You know, so this extraordinary, you know, manufacturing. Let's have a look at this little clip. So this particular video again exercised me a lot. This is a song taken from this new musical called The Wings of Song, which has been out on public release across China in the past month or so. And this song is performed by Tarim, who's you know, a very popular comedian and singer, and one who was lucky enough to have escaped the camps, whereas of course other prominent performers were not so lucky. And here he is performing this incredible song. Have a listen of this. So I'm going to play for me. Come on, come back. There we go.
来，洋王子喽，洋王子喽，来，
有啥好吃的？
有啥好吃的？
啊，
我推荐辣条子，还有烤包子。你听过马奶子，还有羊蹄子，甜甜的皮腰子，无花果子， 还有美美的石榴枝子。来撒来撒，朋友来撒，请。
Yeah, so that's probably about enough of that, isn't it? But let's just reflect a little bit on that style of presentation. You know, I mean, so that is some very glossy tourist advertising. Yeah, and clearly the visual message is, you know, come and consume, right? Let's also think about the style of performance. You know, what really strikes me, I mean, one is the very obvious, you know, come friend, you know, this welcoming narrative, and also this performance of this very kind of stereotyped Xinjiang language, Laisa. So these performers are giving this kind of accented Chinese, really performing this vision of Uyghur otherness for the consumption of the Chinese majority, right? So, you know, in other words, this is a very classic example of the way that tourism serves this deeply colonial agenda, and how music is very deeply implicated in that. Uyghurs performing themselves through the eyes of the colonizer, this kind of exotic but welcoming thing. You know, I mean, if you're thinking about this in American terms, really, I think it would be reasonable to compare this to blackface minstrelsy. You know, it has that kind of flavor about it. So, you know, this obviously is going to be the big thing. This is the dominant narrative that we're going to see increasingly coming out of the region. And what I wanted to leave you with, if I can make my PowerPoint work, yeah, there we go. What I wanted to leave you with was an alternative vision of tourism, a kind of decolonial Uyghur tourism, which is which comes in the form of the shrine festivals. So I'm back again with those shrines, and again, of course, what I'm doing is relaying the voice of Uyghur colleagues, Uyghur scholars who are no longer able to get their own voices out there for many reasons. And I wanted to leave you with a bit of montage of the ethnographic videos taken by my colleague Rahila Dawood at the shrine of Imam Hasim, one of the, again, the destinations for huge pilgrimage and festivals up to quite recently, actually. Rahila was filming at the Shrine Festival in Imam Hasim up to 2013, I think it was, so quite recently that this one was closed down. But now, of course, it has been deconsecrated, desecrated, if you like, and bulldozed. This actual shrine that you see here has been bulldozed. So is this tourism? Of course. You know, this is a kind of tourism in which local people come to a place where they can, you know, further their religious faith, where they can engage with their own history, and where they can also have a lot of fun, you know. So really this was quite a big thing for Rahila. You know, she used to promote this idea of Uyghur shrine festival visits as a kind of tourism, even back before we'd really started talking the narrative of decoloniality. But this then is a really remarkable record of decolonial tourism. Let me just play a little bit of that. There we go. Right, just a very brief clip there. Okay. So that really brings to an end the clips I wanted to show you. Let me see if I can come out of that and stop sharing. So I think perhaps we might reflect a little bit on, you know, what is the relevance of all those peasants and that deeply kind of rural religious culture that I've been showing you there. What kind of relevance does that have to you guys today as highly educated transnational Uyghurs? You know, what could you do with that kind of knowledge and that kind of understanding of your own roots? And I'd be interested to hear your reflections on that. You know, I think some of the quite difficult for me, but also quite inspirational examples I've had from other indigenous cultures when I've started looking into that kind of literature about indigeneity and thinking about, you know, the indigenous peoples of Canada or Australia or even Northern Europe, is to look at the way that, of course, I mean, their cultures have been decimated, worse than decimated, by forms of colonialism imposed by European settler colonialism, you know, and it is painful to think about Uyghur culture in that way, and to contemplate the possibility that these kind of traditions might actually, you know, be lost to the same degree as, say, the First Nations of Canada. And yet there is hope in looking at the example of these indigenous peoples. For example, if we look at Mexico, you know, where so many traditions have been lost through that kind of colonial process, and yet, you know, they have not been totally lost, because you see, you know, very contemporary artists taking those kind of traditions and, you know, remaking them as a kind of culture which speaks to their own sense of identity and what is important in the contemporary world. So, you know, if there is one reason why I think what I am doing is important now, it is really to at least preserve the memory of the meaning, the deeper meanings behind these kind of cultural forms, so that they may be, you know, reimagined in the future. So that is the end of my talk, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for that, Rachel. It was very informative. So now we'll be entering the question and answer period. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them or unmute yourself and ask any questions that you may have. So starting us off, I actually had a question, and going off more of like the hope thread, I was wondering if you touched a little bit about communities in Kazakhstan kind of, you know, taking on that role. So I was wondering, do you think that there would be a possibility of, you know, revitalization of our music and our culture in different areas which are not, you know, our homeland, I guess?
Yeah, I definitely. So that is a project which has been running for a few years now. Let me just share the link in the chat. There's the chat, and there's the link. Yeah, great. So this is a project that we've been working on with some Uyghur colleagues in Turan University in Kazakhstan. And I've also been working with Mukaddes Mijit, who is probably a figure known to many of you, and among many talents, you know, she's a fine ethnographic filmmaker. So we have a lot of great clips on that website, which are of Meshrep in Kazakhstan. So, you know, it's been really interesting working in Kazakhstan, and the community there have been doing like really very interesting things with Meshrep, trying to kind of strengthen their communities and sustain the language and the culture in Kazakhstan. And it really did strike me that the challenges they face are really quite unique to the environment that they find themselves in, you know. So they're facing this particular kind of situation where they are minorities in Kazakhstan, and they have, you know, relatively speaking, a huge amount of freedom to promote their own language and culture, and yet, you know, they do face really serious problems in terms of, you know, economic survival, which impacts on community survival. So they had this huge thing of young Uyghurs, you know, moving out of the rural areas into the big cities, and then losing touch with their roots and their language. So it, you know, always, you know, when culture transplants, then it faces the challenges of that particular place that they're in. Yeah. So Kazakhstan is interesting. Kyrgyzstan is also very interesting, you know. We have Meshrep, of course, across Europe and in America. I don't know if you guys have actually gone to Meshrep, and they all have their own kind of style, right? There are some Meshrep which are very kind of religious in orientation, and others which are a bit more of a kind of drinking party, some which emphasize like the music and the dancing, and others which are much more about, you know, just places for businessmen to meet and make deals together. So, you know, that's what I like about Meshrep, really, that it is this incredibly flexible kind of framework for people to fill with their own meanings.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we have a comment. It says, thank you from Iliar. Thank you for this wonderful webinar. Big fan of Rachel Harris. It's always a great opportunity to hear the knowledge you share. So the first question is, can we say that this terrible situation is Orientalism towards Uyghur culture, and what the Uyghur diaspora can do against it? And the second one, Rachel, do you want to answer the first one first, and then I'll ask the second one?
I'm reading that. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's been a kind of Orientalist approach from China to Uyghur culture for decades. You know, I mean, this goes back even before the founding of the People's Republic of China. You know, you can see these very directly Orientalist tropes of you know, the Chinese gaze on Uyghur culture. So I mean, that's a long-standing thing, you know, and the ways that works have so many direct links between with the European gaze on the Orient, you know. So belly dancing, of course, is this really an inescapable trope, isn't it? The feminization of Uyghur culture, again, it's the feminization of the Orient, who has the right to speak about the culture and all that. Yeah, so completely, yeah, very direct parallels and direct links there. And yeah, that's nice to hear that someone's interested in ethnomusicology. You should probably like message me direct, yeah, and we can talk about possibilities. You know, there are distance learning and that kind of thing, and plenty of short courses. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have a second question. So about the propaganda videos, do you think for the locals in our homeland to be one of these like vloggers or personalized propaganda producers, did it become a new job opportunity with economic and political safety?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that forced labor comes in many shapes and forms, you know, and I do feel that the performers that we see, you know, during these tourist shows, doing these tourist videos, they are also to a greater or lesser degree coerced. You know, I think that that's quite clear. Just as people don't have much choice about moving away from their home and working in a factory for very little money, I think that it's very difficult to say no when you are invited to take part in a propaganda video. Of course, you know, I mean, the pressures are intense. So, you know, I have complete sympathy with these performers, and no criticism at all. You know, I think, you know, they don't really have the freedom to be performing what they want to. But undoubtedly, you know, it is a better job opportunity than the factory labor.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that, you know, these propaganda videos, a lot of it is to, you know, almost erase the culture or put out like a good image for the rest of the world, but to a great extent, would you say that it's also to demoralize the Uyghur people who are still there and to, you know, make them fold, I guess, under the demands of the government?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I did wonder about playing this kind of stuff for you guys, you know, because I think, you know, I'm sure you have a difficult reaction to it. I mean, I do myself, but quite I'm relatively distanced from what's going on. So, you know, I felt unsure about whether I should even like be just repeating this stuff, you know. And so that's why I thought it was really important, just step by step, to show, you know, real stuff underneath the propaganda. Is this meant to demoralize Uyghur people inside the Uyghur homeland? Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is aimed outwards, really, isn't it? So, I mean, we've seen stuff addressing Mike Pompeo. I really love that one. And obviously a lot of stuff aimed at the Chinese market, you know. So what is being aimed at the Uyghurs? I think, you know, they must be, you know, feeling their place within that wider narrative, which is that they have no agency, right, and that they are impelled to show this happiness, you know. And so you know, you could think of a few words for that, right? I mean, demoralized is one, and you know, yeah, yeah. So I mean, it is really hard. It is really hard. Mm.
Well, it looks like we're getting some questions in the chat. I'll just read it out loud again, just for the recording. So we have a question. How was it possible for you to make interviews with Uyghur musicians in Xinjiang without bringing them into trouble? And would this still be possible now?
Yeah, I mean, completely impossible for me now. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been given a visa for many years now, and I'm certainly not trying. Um, Yeah, so I mean, the only interviews that are possible at the moment are ones that will be very heavily state controlled. Yeah, so I mean, that's really why I've turned to Kazakhstan, for one thing, for working outside of the homeland, and also for I've turned to this rather desperate research measure of analysing videos. You know, I mean, it's not by any means a satisfactory form of research, is it? But that's what's open to me at the moment. You know, I mean, I think even for uh, Chinese colleagues, say, who are able to travel there and do some very limited kind of research, you know, it is still very difficult to really understand what's going on in people's lives, and it's very problematic. So, you know, we can hope that things will ease off a bit, but I'm not full of optimism right now, I must say.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you for that. Second question. So there's a question about the dynamics of power in the context of Uyghur indigeneity. So how
Indigeneity.
indigeneity, right? Long
Mm.
word. How can this framework offer unique solutions for the Uyghur community, both in the homeland and in diaspora?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I think that is really um, an interesting development in that kind of whole way that we're thinking about Uyghur identity in that English speaking academic community at the moment. You know, so I mean, there really has been this very pronounced shift away from the whole kind of narrative about minorities, ethnic minorities, towards this understanding of Uyghurs as an indigenous people. You know, and some of my colleagues have been theorizing this quite actively. So, you know, Darren Byler and Sean Roberts also more recently have been really thinking through what it means to talk about indigeneity. And I think one thing that really is highlighted by the use of that kind of language is that this is a colonial relationship. You know, so I think it was my colleague in the UK, Dibyesh Anand, who's comes out of work on Nepal and then Tibet, and subsequently thinking about the Uyghur situation. And so they're really highlighting, you know, this is a colonial relationship. You know, this is not, let's not mess around calling it internal Orientalism or internal colonialism. You know, this is colonial rule. And so that is a really quite distinct shift in the narrative in the English language literature. And of course, the effect of that is to drive apart the English language scholarship even further from the kind of discourse that is possible at the moment within China.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then another one. So whilst the CCP uses Uyghur traditional culture for their propaganda, is there any scope for the Uyghurs in diaspora to also use or even transform their culture, traditional or otherwise, to become something more positive for the Uyghur community elsewhere, for there to continue to be a truly free Uyghur cultural production?
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, I certainly hope so, right? Thank you, Eugene. You know, and I appreciate your efforts at um, engaging with the culture as well. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of work going on already. You know, there are many positive initiatives coming out from Uyghurs in different communities around the world, and I really hope that will continue and increase. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I mean, it is difficult to to pin our hopes on what's happening outside of the homeland, because, you know, the incredible artistry of performers inside the homeland, and the incredibly rich traditional culture that I've just shown you some videos of, you know, it's still there. I believe, you know, it hasn't been completely wiped out. So surely there is there is hope that that will start to re-emerge given time. You know, it's not an easy thing to completely destroy a culture, right? And I think it's always important to think about that cultural revolution period. I mean, obviously it wasn't the same because that was not such a concentrated and directed attack on specific cultures, you know, but nonetheless, I mean, that was a period of incredible violence and chaos and suppression, and yet there was this incredible kind of flowering, a resurgence of culture almost as soon as the direct suppression and chaos was lifted. So, you know, I think there's also hope there. You know, I like to think about those shrines, you know, and they're not these huge, impressive mausolea like you see in Samarkand or Bukhara, for example. I mean, they're very precarious and transient structures. You know, the most impressive thing about them visually is really those flags, you know, and those flags are renewed every year by the people who go to worship at the shrine. So I always, you know, I keep hope there as long as the memory of what the shrine means is still alive. You know, it's very easy for those mud brick buildings to be reconstructed and for the flags to be replanted, you know. Yeah, man, Hong Kong culture. Yes, I mean, you know, yeah, it's also a very difficult situation in Hong Kong at the moment, of course. And it's been good to see that kind of, you know, engagement from young people in Hong Kong. I must say, you know, there are times when you feel that there's so little sympathy and engagement from Chinese people within China. But, you know, you see from Hong Kong people making those connections with what's been happening to the Uyghurs and then what's been happening to them and going, oh, you know, this is part of the same system.
Are there any questions that people may have?
Well, that's a lot of really great questions. Hey, I was going to share a couple more links, wasn't I? There's the chat bar. There we go. Direct messages that send that to everyone. Okay, that's the link to our Sounding Islam in China project. That was a project we were a few years ago, and there's a particular blog at this link which was written by Rahila Dawut and has some incredible recordings of her videos and some of her interviews. And also, to share one more link, this is some more of the videos taken by Rahila and some of her students over the years, and they're very nicely housed on this Music of Central Asia textbook. So that's a really great resource if you want to look at some of this this kind of culture that I've been talking about.
I have one last question if no one else has any. So can you tell us about your latest book?
Oh man, the book. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is a book which covers 10 years of research and quite a difficult 10 years because I started off being able to spend time in a Uyghur village in southern Xinjiang, which was really quite a rare opportunity even then. And I got very interested in the practice of these village women and their kind of Sufi influenced religious gatherings that they called Hikmat, which were really very intense and very beautiful occasions where they would sing extraordinary poetry and do this kind of zikr and really cry very intensely. And so I got very interested in that as a kind of, women's culture, and started to trace the links between what I was seeing in that quite poor village and these very kind of rich traditions of Central Asian Sufism and literature and all that. So that was where it started. And then I just got drawn into the whole kind of question of religious revival that was so very strong in that period of 2009 to 2012, and how everyone was kind of debating about the proper way to be a good Muslim, and these kind of new narratives that were coming up. And then really as I was excluded from the region and had all links with those women cut off, and the whole kind of machinery of repression started to be rolled out in 2016, 17, I began to trace that, in part via social media and also by secondhand reports. So, I mean, it has quite a trajectory, that book. It really goes from really kind of rooted talking to ladies in a village, and then looking at this whole kind of, what is the aim of Xi Jinping and trying to stamp out this culture. Yeah, so it was a big job, but I hope it will do its work. I mean, one in creating a record of what real Uyghur religious culture was like, and then tracing that kind of arc of destruction.
I'll take a look at it. All right, so if there are any questions left, I think that brings us to the end of the seminar.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you all
Thank
for
you so much.
taking your valuable time to be with us.
Yeah, I just want to again thank everyone for coming, and thank you so much, Rachel Harris, for joining us and offering us such amazing insight into Uyghur culture and what is happening during this moment in time. So, thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.